and there are no drugs involved, but apparently I hallucinate and Hi, it's Kay from thebabybuncher.com. My first birth story, it went online a few weeks back, and I've had a lot of positive responses from it. It was a pretty dark story. I suggest you go to my website and take a look. But you know what, I tried to say at the end that, you know, you shouldn't be disheartened by this rough story I had with Frankie, because my next birth went so much better. So let's talk about that one. And full disclaimer, no birth is easy. Actually, some births sound easy when I hear other people's stories, but whatever, I think they're making it up. So, my birth story for my little one John. And by the way, I didn't know the sex of any of my babies until they came out, so at that point he could have been John or he could have been Anna Sophia, which he wasn't. It turned out he was a boy. So then my next baby was a girl and she's Anna, but whatever, John. So John, I already know his personality. He's 2.5. He's a pretty laid back kid most of the time. Well, you wouldn't think so when you see his current tantrums, but he's a 2-year-old. What do you expect? So generally he's a pretty laid back kid. He does everything he needs to. Like he slept through by far the earliest of all my babies in the night. Frankie didn't start till he was a year old. Anna is 11 months old and my god, she does not sleep through the night. John started when he was 8 months old. So that should give you an idea of his personality. And I have a bit of a pet theory that a baby's birth reflects the baby's personality later in life. It's probably totally rubbish, but I like it. It makes sense to me, at least with my kids. So, on the morning of my due date, I went for a regularly scheduled checkup at the hospital, and I could feel something was going on. I had a feeling like TMI, my mucus plug was starting to come loose. And I had some like little twinges that made me think, are those really early contractions? I mean, I'd only had a baby 1.5 years before, so I remembered pretty well how it goes. So I went into the hospital and I had my appointment. They couldn't find any sign of contractions on the machine, on the whatever it is, the CKG, no, whatever machine it is. They didn't find any sign of it, but they listened to me when I said, you know, I think my mucus plug is coming out and I feel like something's happening. So when I went in to see the gynecologist, after I'd had my usual appointment with the nurse and they checked that the heart rate was fine and everything, I talked to the doctor and I said to her, I think today might be the day. And she said, well, we have this tea that we give out, and don't worry, it won't trigger labour unless you're ready, your body's actually ready for labour. But if it's ready, it kind of gives it a kick start and gets things going for you. And I thought, whoa, that sounds pretty crazy. It's totally like a holistic thing, which is weird that a hospital doctor is diagnosing you. You usually expect them to throw pharmaceuticals at you. But no, she was cool. So she sent me home and she said, dilute this for like ages, like stew it for like 20 minutes in hot water, in about 1 litre of hot water, and then drink the lot. So what I did was I went home, had a bit of food, my mum helped me make the tea up, I eventually drank about half of it, then I went for a nap, then I woke up and I had the other half, and I had some cooked dinner and had some more food. And I was feeling more twinges after I'd already had after the nap, but then I went back to bed after that, and I woke up at about 10 o'clock at night, or 11 I guess, and I was having some real contractions, but not crazy real. Like, I knew that I'd learned the hard way the time before that if this doesn't make me want to vomit and cry at the same time, then this isn't a real contraction. And this was kind of okay. So I lay in bed and I tried to sleep and it didn't work. And it slowly built up and built up. And I wandered into the living room and discovered my husband hadn't gone to bed yet. Sorry, I'm talking really fast because I'm really excited. But he was up watching The American Office on TV. He was really excited because he could tell that the baby was coming from the faces I'd been making with my mild contractions during dinner time. And it was about midnight by this point. So we sat watching TV together while my contractions slowly crescendoed. And at about 2 in the morning, he'd started about an hour before timing them on his phone. He downloaded a contraction app timer, which I've done through all 3 labours. It's pretty good. Makes things a bit easier. I recommend it, but I'm not going to tell you which one to get. You can find them. But basically, He timed my contractions, and after a while he said, okay, it's up to about 4 or 5 minutes apart and you sound like you're getting more into it, like the noises you're making make it sound like it's more intense. I think it's time to go to the hospital. I said, cool, okay. So we already had my stuff by the door, packed up, ready to go, because we could tell it was going to be the day like several hours before. We knocked on my mum's door, who was staying with us at the time, to tell her we're going now, you know, Frankie is upstairs, you know, she was there to basically take care of him. And she gave me a hug, told me good luck, and we slowly made our way out to the car. I couldn't sit on my back in the car because it was really hurting my back every time I tried to lie on my back. So I lay on my side in the car and I looked out the window, kind of half in a daze because things were getting a bit more intense. Looked up at the sky. I remember murmuring, oh, it's a full moon tonight. By the way, if you didn't know, more babies are born on full moons. I've never seen any statistics talking about it, but you go and talk to any midwife and they will tell you, oh yeah, there is a definite spike in women going into labour on the full moon. Crazy, right? But basically, it takes about 20 minutes, 25 minutes to get to the hospital. It was pretty fast because it was the middle of the night and there were no cars on the road, basically. We got there. My husband let me out. He put me on a chair by the waiting room and took the car back so he could park it. And I slowly laboured in the corner of the waiting room with nobody else around. It was quite peaceful. Oh, by the way, another TMI thing. What did I have for dinner that I have learned you should not have for dinner right before you are about to go into labour? Don't cook yourself chili. Don't do things with onions and beans that are, you know, usually create certain unpleasant side issues, because when you're in labour that's going to be worse. And I was like, thank God no one else is around because this is gross. I'm sorry. Stinky. Anyway. Isn't that lovely? So aren't I ladylike lady? Anyway, Frank eventually came in and we made our way over to the reception and they told us, no, go straight up, don't worry about it. You can come back, and he told my husband, you can come back down once you've got her settled and we can sort out the paperwork. But they weren't going to make me stand there for 20 minutes filling out paperwork while I was labouring, which was pretty cool. So I went up and the lady greeted me. They called up and told her that a pregnant one was coming up. And the beautiful thing about it is, I don't know why, but they don't get many labours at a time in that hospital. It's not like there's tons of hospitals nearby. But there was one other woman labouring when I arrived, and within about half an hour of me getting there, she was done. The baby was out, like. So I went in and they looked at me and they saw the pain I was in and they said, okay, forget about going into the intermediate room where we check whether you're actually dilated enough and decide whether we're going to keep you or send you home. Just go straight through to the labouring room. So I went in, I lay down on the special beds that are kind of hard, but you know, they go back and forth and they give you a bit of support and yeah, whatever. And they checked me and I was 3 centimetres dilated. You know what, I could handle it because a similar issue had happened with my first labour, and by the way, it happened with my third labour. I basically just take ages to dilate, and then once it gets going, it really happens. But there's a long period of time before anything actually happens at all. So I was pretty disappointed, but I, you know, accepted it. I wasn't too exhausted by this point because I had had a bit of sleep, I'd had food, and I'd made sure to stay hydrated. And so I basically got my husband to set up everything. I had figured out from my previous labour that it's quite nice to listen to TV in between contractions. It helps you take your mind off things and not focus on the pain. So I got him to set up my laptop, and I'd put a few movies that I downloaded onto it. So I basically had Mean Girls playing on loop in the background, and I just listened to Mean Girls between contractions because I love that movie. And I basically just sort of stayed there for the long haul. You know, at one point I went in the tub and then I got out again because things seemed to be slowing down and I was feeling kind of queasy. I went back and forth, you know, almost throwing up and then not doing it for quite a while. And I don't know, things started to blur for a while. It went on a pretty long time, so I'd basically been admitted about 2:30 in the morning. And by, I think by about 5 AM things started to really heat up. the midwife had given me a couple of homeopathic things that they love to give you in Austrian hospitals, and she was super supportive. She left me alone when I needed to be alone. I was the only woman labouring there, so I had her to myself. And she understood that there's times when a woman needs to be on her own. She'd been in the business for like 30 years, I think. There's a time when, you know, you just need to focus on it. Especially for me, I have a real problem with worrying about how comfortable everyone is around me, which is crazy. Like, one of the things I loved about the room was that there was a nice sofa in there so my husband could lie down and take a nap. Because thinking about him being really tired and waiting for me to finish because he's exhausted gives me extra stress, and I swear that stress makes it take longer. So knowing that he was comfortable was really important to me, and knowing that I wasn't bothering her and she could go off and do her own things unless I really needed her made me relaxed and helped it to happen. But there were times when it was a really intense contraction where it sounded like I was losing my, you know, confidence and kind of whimpering rather than breathing through it, and she would come in and she would help me. So she was fantastic. I love her. I bumped into her a few times since then, like around town, and she's the best. But anyway, so she was there until about, oh god, I'm sorry, I'll probably get some of this information wrong, but I think she stayed until about 7 in the morning. Yeah, and then there was a shift change, and a new midwife came in who I wasn't quite sure about, but you know, she turned out to be cool, and even cooler when I had her for my 3rd baby, but that's another story. And I was in the tub by this point, and things started to get really intense about that point. And I've discovered that whenever I go into transition, you know, the point between contracting to, you know, get bigger down there and actually getting your baby pushing out, this is the point when I lose my confidence usually, and I get really upset. Seems to just happen every time. And I suddenly started thinking, oh, I can't do this anymore, this is too much. I'm starting to feel really tired. I was starting to sort of drift a bit between contractions, and I thought, you know what, I'm starting to think I want to drop hints about having an epidural. And I've never had an epidural, but I felt like I wanted one in all 3 labours at some point or other. But this was very briefly, because I started murmuring to her, do you have children of your own? I wanted to see basically if she had gone through this before, and could I trust her to know how painful it is. And she said, oh yeah, I have a few. They're older now, but yeah, I've had babies. I was like, okay. And I said, to be honest, if this gets any worse, I don't think I can do this anymore, and I need painkillers. And she said, well, let's take a look and see where you're at. And so I leaned back and she took a look, and well, also I said, you know, I don't think my waters are broken, but it like really hurts. I want them to break now. Like, I feel like there's pressure, but it's just like it can't come out until the waters break. So she said, well, I'm going to take a look at you. She put this huge glove on, and it had a little hook on the end of it. And she said, if you are wide enough, like if you're dilated enough, I will break your waters for you and we'll get things going. And so she said, okay, let me know when this contraction's over, lie back quickly, and we'll do it then. And just at this point, my husband, just before we did this, came in the room, and he said, how are we doing here? He'd just woken up from his nap, but he hadn't been sleeping that great because I was, you know, yelling in the next room. But he woke up and he said, how are we doing? And I said, oh, I don't know if we need you yet. And then I lay back, and she looked, and she instantly could tell that I was 9 centimetres dilated, and so she instantly broke my waters for me, and I felt this, this relief of pressure. It was a really good feeling. But then I suddenly had an urgent need to throw up. And, you know, all of this is going on in German, basically, with the midwife, because she doesn't speak much English, and I speak really good German. So the only word I could throw out there in the time, while like it was welling up inside me, was the German word for vomit. Kotzen! Kotzen! And she didn't understand what I was going on about, I think because I'd just been speaking English to my husband, so it was taking her a moment to switch. And so I started throwing up a little bit into the tub, sorry. And she instantly grabbed one of those little, you know, kidney dish things and shoved it under my mouth, and my husband held it there for me, and I started throwing up into that. I filled that one, and I got another one, I threw up, and they filled that one, and then I was done. I threw up a lot. And at this point I suddenly said, oh, contraction happening, in English or German, who knows which. And I was still on my back from where she'd examined me, because at this point I just couldn't really move. I was like paralysed by pain, and God knows why I don't take painkillers. I should just give up. And I had one contraction lying back on my back in the tub. Why did anyone ever make women give birth in that position? It's a nightmare. It's so much more painful on your back, or at least for me it is. However I'm shaped down there. I do not recommend it. Do whatever you can to get into any other position possible, but don't do it on your back. It's so much more painful, because apparently you're up to 30% narrower when you're on your back from just how everything closes up. So you've got a baby's head trying to get through something that was already way too small in the first place, and now it's 30% smaller. So I murmured in German and then in English, but after the contraction was done, I need to get into another position. And I remembered at this point urgently that I'd given birth to my first baby on my side. So I said, I need to turn over, and my husband tried to get me on lift me out of the tub, because he misunderstood what I meant, and put me on my knees, and I was like, no. As soon as they got out of the tub, I needed the water around me. It felt like a cocoon. So he just I just said, on my side, and he just left me on my side, and I held on to the what is it, the bar on the side of the tub, and I just held on like that. And another contraction came quickly, and I pushed really hard, and boop, his head was out. And then I was lying there kind of in a daze on my side, and I could have sworn someone told me, okay, it's time to get the body out now too. And in seconds I pushed really hard and I got the rest of him out. And the midwife was so shocked that she was actually on the phone when I did it, because she was supposed to call the doctor on call as soon as it was time for the baby to come out, and she hadn't even managed to make the phone call, and she hadn't managed to get her gloves on. She just ended up having to do it bare hands in the water. And it turns out nobody actually told me that I needed to get the body out. Apparently I invented this conversation in my head to justify what I was doing, which I actually ended up doing a similar thing in my third birth. It turns out I kind of have hallucinations when I'm in labour, and there are no drugs involved, but apparently I hallucinate, and I hear people telling me things that they're not telling me.